Welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. My name is Michael LeBlanc, and I am your host. This podcast is produced in conjunction with Retail Council of Canada. Michon Williams is my special guest in this episode, sharing her career journey, emphasizing an early interest in technology, and explaining her role as Chief Technology Officer at Walmart Canada. Michon highlights the importance of balancing innovation and stability, operating on three horizons: stability, incremental improvements, and long-term disruptions. We discuss the need for local solutions in Canada due to unique market requirements, the rapid pace of innovation in retail, particularly post-pandemic, and the role of AI in enhancing efficiency and customer experience. Michon advises retailers to foster a culture of experimentation and continuous learning, and encourages women in tech to be curious and proactive in their career development. Let's listen in now. Michon, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for having me here at Walmart headquarters. It's great to see you in person. It's close by where I live, so it all just worked out. So thanks for taking time to do some chit and chat.
Thanks for coming in. Great to talk with you.
Let's talk about you. Let's talk about your personal professional journey and what you do for a living here at Walmart.
Oh, gosh. Well, it's a long story. How do I make it short and snappy?
Well, you've got a clear, what looks to be like a clear early interest in tech. At least looking at your educational background, was that always something you wanted to, were you always interested in that?
Thanks for noticing that. I was just broadly curious. I was really interested in all the topics in high school, took art and history and philosophy and linear algebra. And in the 90s, I got into computer science in high school and just knew that you could solve a whole bunch of problems. You could be creative and technical. So I got into that at a relatively early age.
Was there a teacher or a moment, an epiphany in that journey when you
lots of helping hands for sure, but I was lucky. I had an internship at RBC in high school. They had a co-op in your last year. Back then they had OACs. And I did a co-op program at International Trade. And they had me filing paper about prospective customers, and I helped them turn that into a spreadsheet and then a database that helped them win some contracts. I was like, I know technology is going to be something really exciting. I think at the time I was the only person with access to the internet.
I remember being at Black & Decker, and we were, it was the same. We had big image files we were transferring back and forth, and they were coming by courier. I'm like, have you guys heard of this email thing? It could be big, and it could be transformational. And then, so you did that. Were you always business oriented? You mentioned arts and different things. I mean, you've wound up
like unlocking problems.
Business.
Isn't that what business does, right? We find different ways to add value to customers. I was always interested in the customer experience, but not without the how.
Okay.
So I wanted to learn how. Well, how do you impact the customer experience? So that's how I got deeper into tech. Not just about the experience, but actually how you execute on things.
Interesting. Now, you're CTO. Now, not to break apart the whole Walmart org chart, CDO, CIO, CTO, what do you do as Chief Technology Officer?
I think we all need to wear multiple hats to solve problems for customers. But as the CTO, I'm responsible for tech delivery into the market. And a lot of the time we leverage solutions from global, and increasingly, with things like international marketplace, it's critical that we're on the same platforms. But that requires a lot of local solutions too. We have about 30% local solutions, 70% leverage solutions, and it all needs to come together for the experience of the customer, both in store and online.
That's interesting. When you say local solutions, is that Microsoft Canada, or is that like a native Canadian tech thing?
Well,
what do you consider?
We have a lot of local requirements or unique things that we need to do to serve the needs of Canadian customers.
And all those things.
Not just regulations, but certainly the healthcare landscape is quite different in Canada. And so for our pharmacies, for our payment of pharmacy prescription and insurance regulations, not insurance regulations, but insurance capabilities, it's a different market.
Province to province, it's a different market.
Province to province is different. The needs of customers are different. So sometimes we need to come to the market with something completely different than what we do in the U.S. or in China or in Mexico or anywhere else. Yeah.
You came from the banking industry, and not just a co-op program, but you spent a lot of time in the banking industry. So not dissimilar scale to a retailer the size of Walmart. I do laugh sometimes when banks, maybe because I'm a veteran retailer, the banks say, yeah, we're like a retailer. I'm like, it feels like the scale is the same, but what do you think of the pace and the learnings, and what's been your experience moving from banking FIs to retail?
I thought banking was it. Like I loved my career in banking. It was amazing, but I never thought I was going to go to retail. But I did have an interesting experience in my last job at RBC, setting up the store of the future. Oh, okay. So, I think the banks have always admired aspects of retail, and certainly there is a big retail component. But that's when I started to think about choreography. Technology and choreography. How do you use technology to create the experience for both the associates or the employees that are in the physical location, and how you flow customers through and what their experience is in the physical space? So that kind of got me interested in retail. But moving to retail, it was a real culture shock. It was really different. I think that what's been really cool at Walmart is just the speed with which, if there's a problem, we need to move fast. Is that your biggest, I wouldn't say surprise, but is that your biggest kind of observation, both culturally and just the mechanics of day to day, the pace is? Yeah, I do think it's not that banking doesn't innovate, because, obviously lots of resources, really critical that we innovate, but the speed of disruption in retail has been so fast, and especially the pandemic. The pandemic led to such an acceleration of online grocery. I think that was a real wake-up call for all retailers, where the pivot to omni really happened super quickly. I've heard it described as kind of a retail metabolism. Things just move faster. You need to digest things faster. You need to experiment and try things in the markets. So, definitely the speed and the, how quickly you need to try things, experiment, sometimes fail. Supply chain has been a really interesting revelation for me in the past 7 years that I've been in retail. Right. How you moving things, moving things, and obviously what a critical role the frontline associates play in that, and how we need to enable them with technology to be able to execute what is a very different frontline job than it was just before the pandemic. You talked about the role of innovation. I want to spend some time on that because, it's similar to banking. One of the key criteria for anyone in your role is stability, right? The system's got to be up. They got to transfer the money. Everything has to happen. And, of course, in retail, if I talk to a store manager, they would say, whatever you're working on, I don't care. I want the cashes to work. I want the self-checkouts to work. I want my apps to work. How do you balance, kind of a two-part question, how do you balance innovation and stability, and then how do you foster a culture within that says, look, we've got to be stable, but at the same time, somehow we've got to also innovate, as you say, to keep up not only with the market, but with the customer expectations? Yeah, I think it's not an easy thing to do. But I do think the mental model I have is just we need to be operating on 3 horizons at any given time. So horizon 1, we've got our things that have to be up, that have to be running. There's certain times of the year that's more critical, but we're really trying to make sure that all times of the year we're offering that stability with online transaction, what products are available online, being in stock, being fast, being full. Horizon 2 is, there's little pockets of things that we're trying to move the needle on. We're trying to expand our capabilities in the pharmacy, as I mentioned. We're trying to, find pockets of places where we can use AI to enrich the customer experience, to enrich the associate experience. And then Horizon 3, which is, kind of our longer term, what are the major disruptions? What are the key technology platforms we need to move towards to have, even more capabilities that we can bring into the Canadian market? So I think it's really critical that you have those multiple horizons, and sometimes you need to divide your teams a little bit so folks are focused on what's the health, what's skills, the stability, right? Different skills, right? and it's not that one person can't do all of those things. It's just having the focus in the roles to make sure that we're doing it with excellence in each of the domains. Let's talk about that Horizon 3. So it's known that Walmart, as many organizations, have kind of done different models about how they're going to proceed or
pursue innovation. At one point, it was kind of distributed in the different countries. Now it's a more centralized model. I'm kind of interested in how you go and grab innovation and how you kind of upload innovation and how the innovation process works here. Is there like a big wall where here's 50 things you can choose from, here's your a la carte menu, pull this down, that might work in your country? How do you see that from your level?
Yeah, it's actually been over the past couple of years that the CTOs of each market are coming together a lot more. And part of the reason that I thought coming to Walmart was so exciting is that there's a real, permission and desire to innovate locally. Things can't happen well if everything is driven from the center. So I think that the leadership really sees the countries as a portfolio of opportunities. I do think in Canada, we've done a really good job with early adoption of automation in the supply chain. And that's critical to be able to offer, the products that people want when they want them. Canada's a big country. We cover a lot of ground. We need to, think about how we can do things faster. I think
even at your scale, right? When I'm asked to describe the Canadian retail environment, one of the things I talk about is this diseconomy of scale, right? Vast nation, vast geography. Nobody's here. Well, there's a few more people here than used to be. But,
yeah, and growing, yeah,
and growing, and a whole other kind of topic is how do you address all these millions of new Canadians? But we'll leave that for another day. But certainly growing. But still, regardless, we are a vast nation, and there must be some interesting learnings for that kind of not just go to the U.S. but also go to some other nations like a Mexico or something.
Yeah, definitely. And back to the supply chain in Canada, I think why we've had to innovate with automation is that we have concentrated areas where the demand outstrips the nodes that we have. So we've had to figure out how can we fulfill, like for example in the GTA with online grocery just taking off. We didn't have enough nodes to meet the demand, so I had to figure out how do we automate through the stores, leveraging our associates, but also augmenting capacity to be able to deliver when the demand is concentrated. So I think that each geography offers, some unique attributes that lead to accelerated innovation in those different pockets. And then if you can come together as multi-country, you can figure out what did we learn in one country? Does that solve a problem in another? And then go from there. So really it is like a portfolio of different problems that lead to growth in certain areas, and then you bring it all together to figure out, what's the right solution set for any given retail environment.
And I guess that's where both your size and scope is beneficial because you can reach out. But at the same time, whatever you build that's new, it's got to be scalable, right? I mean, you're just a big company, so it's whatever you do, it has to be scalable. It's a niche idea. Niche ideas, kind of come and go, and how could it actually make a difference? Put some numbers on the board, right?
Well, one of the things that we're constantly doing is we've got a lot of different innovations that we're trying. In the U.S., there was a big investment in Samsung handhelds to enable frontline associates to have access to devices to be able to do their jobs. That wasn't the right model for us in Canada. We had, instances where, devices were getting lost and different things. And, obviously that's a huge investment. So, we've had to try different things in the Canadian market and are now working with looking at different ways of having lockers so that everybody can have a device that's always charged, it's always ready, and we can figure out where
always
those,
secure. I mean, then you've got to worry about securing those. When people bring their own BYODs, as I think the industry calls it, you got to worry about the security around that, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, security is one thing, but, we don't think that, at least in Canada, having folks have to use their personal devices is always the right answer. So, we want to be able to enable them and empower them with devices. And then there's, RFID and other things. So those need to interoperate with lots of different things that we might not, those use cases might not work as well with like a BYOD solution.
Right.
So I think that the answer to your larger question is, how do you manage innovation in such a large company that's federated? And I think you got to look at it as a portfolio and make sure that you're taking the right solutions to solve the right problem in the market, which sometimes is leverage and sometimes is using local providers and the opportunity to innovate to solve what's unique in the market.
So what are we in now? We're 13, 14 minutes, and you've already mentioned it once a little bit, AI, but now let's get into AI because it is kind of a big
Everyone
topic.
wants to talk about it.
Everybody wants to talk about it. So
I read in trade press something that Walmart put out that said there was a 100x benefit in efficiency over doing, I think it was online posting or something like that. Now, is that kind of an edge case, or are you seeing examples where AI can actually move the needle forward in a measurable way? What's your app? Take your temperature on AI. Underhyped, overhyped, about the right hype. How are you feeling about this AI stuff?
I feel like it's about the right hype. It's about the right hype for the time it is, because, there are so many things that we've had to do that are like repetitive activities. And, the large language models really do help us with things like content descriptions and other things that you might have to do manually, or to catch errors, or to even parse through different information for a given product type to
check
say
code. Whatever.
Yeah. Or like, what is this more like an energy drink? Is this more like a soft drink? Help you tag the products correctly. Help you identify when there's attributes, because people need to be able to find the products that they need, and so that tagging and that content quality is very important. And to do that at scale of, thousands and hundreds of thousands and even millions of products in a given category can be, really laborious. So AI is an amazing tool, but I think we're at the stage where it's really important you have human in the loop.
Okay.
We need to make sure that we're understanding, we can flag, we're reviewing that
prediction and
that
judgment
content.
working
exactly together.
Kind of
Yeah. But the scale that you start to work at, and I think that even for smaller companies, being able to use those tools to provide recommendations on podcast topics, recommendations on content quality.
I do think sometimes. If we think back, off mic, we were talking about a little bit of background in my e-commerce. Is that, back when I started e-commerce, it was $1 million to launch a site for no matter who you were. It was very complicated. And now you've got
barriers to entry.
Right. So now you've got platforms that you can get up and going on a monthly fee. Yeah. And it's kind of a leveling of the playing field. Doesn't mean you've got the right product, the right merchandise, all that stuff.
Yeah.
But the technology has kind of gone away as an inhibitor. I feel like AI has the ability to do that in the fullness of time. Like, all sizes of business and retailers can use it in some way, and in some respects levels the playing field. As a technologist, do you think of it that way sometimes too?
One of the key things that I learned in the early days of CompSci was this idea of modularization. And I've always kind of thought of technology as building blocks. So, if you think of AI, like, it really is just like what Gen AI can do. Even my kids are playing around with image generation. It's just so mind-blowing. But if you think about all the technology that has led up to this moment, it's not surprising when you think about all of the different modules that are coming together to create those solutions. And so I think that this abstraction of, bits and bytes to data, to applications, to the cloud, to those shared services, like what we've done over the past 20 years has all led up to this point. To
this moment.
Yeah.
Well, so as a technologist, let me ask you this question. Are you a sports fan, baseball fan, or anything? Let's assume you're a baseball fan because you'll get the metaphor.
I'm a peripheral fan. Like I enjoy it, but I nerd out in other ways.
Okay. If you were a baseball fan, what inning are we in for AI?
We're in spring training.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think I think people are really thinking about what we can use it for. Is it a party trick or really like what are the different use cases? And because it is a general purpose technology, like it's really one of those things like the internet, like the cloud, like mobility. It can be applied to so many different things. I think we're figuring out like what's the run of play in all of the different domains that are really going to be useful. I do see so much potential, not only for content generation, but for application development, for software development, to make it more usable, right? Using language as opposed to coding is a more natural. I was always like, I like doing pseudocode, but as soon as you convert the pseudocode, which is just kind of what you want your program to do in plain language, into the actual programming language, you run into bugs, you do all of that. Sure. But if AI can help you translate, just like you're saying, setting up a website used to be huge barriers to entry. Now we can start to use human language to convert into machine language. And I think that that's just going to be so exciting.
Frees up the people to focus on other things, right?
Yeah.
let's bridge that over to the marketing and Walmart and technology. I mean, since I've known the organization, everything from how you communicate to vendors to how you're out there and doing marketplaces and things like that, marketing, technology, and Walmart go together in the same sentence pretty easily. What don't we know about? What are you working on from a marketing perspective where you're kind of sitting back and working, applying your skills and your team in the marketing context?
So marketing is just like technology, it's such a broad concept. It's so many different applications. I have to say, if were to interpret what folks don't know about, associates are the front. Associates are, obviously our e-commerce and our digital experience and how we do retail marketing online is a critical component. But, people still show up in stores.
The vast majority of retail is done the way it was done when you started your career and mine.
We're asking associates to show up in stores and do a lot more activities than they would have done in the past in terms of like stocking shelves more often because, online orders are being processed and folks are shopping
There's
in the
a lot more going on in the store than there was 5 years ago,
in
10
the stores.
years ago.
So really, like, how people experience our brand is through our associates. So enabling them through applications that they can use to figure out, where are we struggling with in stock. What are the flyers driving in terms of sales in the store? How are immediately are customers experiencing friendly, fast, and fresh in the stores?
Right.
And being able to act on that and being empowered to act on that through insights that they get through the devices that we enable them. So the application experience that we're creating for associates needs to mirror the digital experience we create for customers so that they can be able to fulfill the promise and the brand vision that we have in the stores.
Do you have a pathway for the associates to feed ideas upwards and to the organization?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have huddles, we have town halls. We're looking for ways of flowing that information. And we're also having customers flow their insights to the associates. So we really need to create that two-way. But we do have an internal social media platform that enables them to have conversations with their field leadership, with each other, to share stories. And we run those insight and those feeds also to TVs that are in the back room and into the store support center so that we're seeing a lot more of what's actually happening on the ground and hearing directly from associates and being inspired by them and what they're doing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's shift to kind of the final section, advice section. Let's call it the advice section. So based on all your experience, what's your advice for your fellow retailers out there? Understanding that, you have resources that most don't, but at the same time, many of the challenges and opportunities are. Let's frame it in the 2 starts and 1 stop. The 2 things they should start doing and 1 thing that maybe used to work, maybe never worked, but what's your experience with that?
Well, like I said about the horizons, what I would say is it's really important to have that ongoing conversation about what's really working in the store or online. So we have that in the trade meeting. So senior leadership comes together with field leadership and really talk about what are the strategies and what's working and what are some of the challenges and what's working in different markets, whether that's Quebec, it's out east, it's out west. So doing that regularly and making sure that you're really understanding what's happening day to day is critical in retail. So if you're not doing that, start that. And as a technologist, I sit in on those meetings and I listen in about what's happening because you never know when there's a technology solution or something maybe we've rolled out that either has a positive or a negative impact.
Unintended consequences.
And you got to change fast. Like you got to act fast and really actually understand what's happening.
That's a culture of accepting failure as well, isn't it?
I'm really grateful for that at Walmart. And I think it's important because, I don't think we would have made it through the pandemic or really, doubled down on our tech investment and figured out a way to pivot from much more of a bricks and mortar retail to a truly omni retailer if we weren't willing to experiment and fail and try things and pick the places where you can go with a half-baked solution to really try it and see if it works.
That's so interesting. We could spend a whole podcast on that. That kind of, the overall tech industry's idea of the MVP, the minimal viable product, versus for many decades, retail's like it's got to be perfect and bulletproof before you put it in. So you kind of I think the pandemic was useful for that, for the industry.
We talk about MVP a lot, but we have a value in Walmart Canada Tech called More Value Sooner, which is like, what is the next best thing that we can be working on that solves the immediate problem? That's very different from having the old days of like having a business requirements document that is like 120 pages long. So it really has to be about constantly saying what's going to add the most value to the customer and the associate tomorrow.
Okay, let's talk about advice for people who, women particularly. You're in a fairly male-dominated category of the business. What's your advice for women starting out in the technology world? What was your key to success?
I would have to say that, like, curiosity. There were definitely times in my career, and this is advice valuable for women, but for anybody who feels like they're not fully seen. And that can be anybody. I do think that there are expectations around what it means to be a technologist. And some people will say, I'm not technical. If anyone told me something, stay in project management or stay in this area, I was like, well, I want to learn about that other stuff. I'm not going to let you tell me what I should know or not know. If there was an area that I felt nervous about because I didn't understand it, I found a way to dive in, even if it wasn't in my job. Take a course. AI is a big topic right now. If you're feeling nervous about that, that's your sign to go learn it. That's your sign to get curious and to, there's just no reason now that you can't. Coursera and all these things, like Walmart has invested a ton in making those programs available, but they're not expensive. The barriers to entry on that are not high anymore. So if you're feeling nervous about something, go learn it. If you're feeling put in a box, break out of it by figuring it out and then, proving them wrong.
Fantastic. Great advice. If people want to get in touch with you, are you a LinkedIn person? And
LinkedIn is my home base. I learned so much about people's career trajectories, what they're working on, what they're curious about, what startup companies are doing. So I'm definitely on there. So come and follow me.
Fantastic. Well, I know you're traveling soon. You must travel a fair bit. I know you're traveling soon. You were going to be joining me on the stage at Retail Marketing, but the mothership called and get together. But
hopefully next time. I love those the conferences where everybody gets together and gets to share ideas. So sorry to miss out on that, but hopefully there'll be other ways to connect.
Well, it's going to be a great event, and thank you again for taking time to join me here at Walmart headquarters in Mississauga on the Voice of Retail podcast.
I know you're going to have a great time with Sabrina.
Right on.
So looking forward to hearing that as
Fantastic.
well.
Fantastic.
Thanks for tuning into this episode of The Voice of Retail. If you haven't already, follow on your favorite podcast platform so new episodes will land automatically each week. And be sure and check out my other retail industry media properties, the Remarkable Retail Podcast with Steve Dennis and the Global E-Commerce Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Blanc, Senior Retail Advisor, Keynote Speaker. If you want more content or chat, follow me on LinkedIn. Safe travels, everyone.